Adolf Hitler, the leader of Germany's Nazi party, was one of the most powerful and notorious dictators of the 20th century. Hitler capitalized on economic woes, popular discontent and political infighting to take absolute power in Germany beginning in 1933. Germany's invasion of Poland in 1939 led to the outbreak of World War II, and by 1941 Nazi forces had occupied much of Europe. Hitler's virulent anti-Semitism and obsessive pursuit of Aryan supremacy fueled the murder of some 6 million Jews, along with other victims of the Holocaust. After the tide of war turned against him, Hitler committed suicide in a Berlin bunker in April 1945. Early life. Adolf Hitler was born on the 20th of April, 1889, in Braunau, a small Austrian town near the Austro-German frontier. After his father, Alois, retired as a state customs official, young Adolf spent most of his childhood in Linz, the capital of Upper Austria. Not wanting to follow in his father's footsteps as a civil servant, he began struggling in secondary school and eventually dropped out. Alois died in 1903, and Adolf pursued his dream of being an artist, though he was rejected from Vienna's Academy of Fine Arts. After his mother, Clara, died in 1908, Hitler moved to Vienna, where he pieced together a living painting scenery and monuments and selling the images. Lonely, isolated, and a voracious reader, Hitler became interested in politics during his years in Vienna, and developed many of the ideas that would shape Nazi ideology. Service in World War I. In 1913, Hitler moved to Munich, in the German state of Bavaria. When World War I broke out the following summer, he successfully petitioned the Bavarian king to be allowed to volunteer in a reserve infantry regiment. Deployed in October 1914 to Belgium, Hitler served throughout the Great War and won 2 decorations for bravery, including the rare Iron Cross First Class, which he wore to the end of his life. Hitler was wounded twice during the conflict. He was hit in the leg during the Battle of the Somme in 1916, and temporarily blinded by a British gas attack near Ypres in 1918. A month later, he was recuperating in a hospital at Passeork, northeast of Berlin, when news arrived of the armistice and Germany's defeat in World War I. Like many Germans, Hitler came to believe the country's devastating defeat could be attributed not to the Allies, but to insufficiently patriotic traitors at home. A myth that would undermine the post-war Weimar Republic and set the stage for Hitler's rise. Nazi Party. After Hitler returned to Munich in late 1918, he joined the small German Workers' Party, which aimed to unite the interests of the working class with a strong German nationalism. His skilled oratory and charismatic energy helped propel him in the party's ranks, and in 1920 he left the army and took charge of its propaganda efforts. In one of Hitler's strokes of propaganda genius, the newly renamed National Socialist German Workers, or in short, Nazi, Party adopted a version of the ancient symbol of the Hakenkreuz, or hooked cross, as its emblem. Printed in a white circle on a red background, Hitler's swastika would take on terrifying symbolic power in the years to come. By the end of 1921, Hitler led the growing Nazi Party, capitalizing on widespread discontent with the Weimar Republic and the punishing terms of the Versailles Treaty. Many dissatisfied former army officers in Munich would join the Nazis, notably Ernst Röhm, who recruited the strong armed squads known as the Sturmabteilung, or SA, which Hitler used to protect party meetings and attack opponents. Persecution of Jews. On the 15th of September, 1935, passage of the Nuremberg laws deprived Jews of German citizenship, and barred them from marrying or having relations with persons of German or related blood, though the Nazis attempted to downplay its persecution of Jews in order to placate the international community during the 1936 Berlin Olympics, in which German Jewish athletes were not allowed to compete. Additional decrees over the next few years disenfranchised Jews and took away their political and civil rights. In addition to its pervasive anti-Semitism, Hitler's government also sought to establish the cultural dominance of Nazism by burning books, forcing newspapers out of business, using radio and movies for propaganda purposes, and forcing teachers throughout Germany's educational system to join the party. Much of the Nazi persecution of Jews and other targets occurred at the hands of the Geheimstaatspolizei, or also known as Gestapo, or Secret State Police, an arm of the SS that expanded during this period. Outbreak of World War II. In March 1936, against the advice of his generals, Hitler ordered German troops to reoccupy the demilitarized left bank of the Rhine. Over the next 2 years, Germany concluded alliances with Italy and Japan, annexed Austria and moved against Czechoslovakia, all essentially without resistance from Great Britain, France or the rest of the international community. Once he confirmed the alliance with Italy in the so-called Pact of Steel in May 1939, Hitler then signed a non-aggression pact with the Soviet Union. On the 1st of September, 1939, Nazi troops invaded Poland, finally prompting Britain and France to declare war on Germany. Blitzkrieg. After ordering the occupation of Norway and Denmark in April 1940, Hitler adopted a plan proposed by one of his generals to attack France through the Ardennes forest. The Blitzkrieg, or the Lightning War, attack began on the 10th of May. Holland quickly surrendered, followed by Belgium. German troops made it all the way to the English Channel, forcing British and French forces to evacuate en masse from Dunkirk in late May. On the 22nd of June, France was forced to sign an armistice with Germany. Hitler had hoped to force Britain to seek peace as well, but when that failed he went ahead with his attacks on that country, followed by an invasion of the Soviet Union in June 1941. After the attack on Pearl Harbor that December, the United States declared war on Japan, and Germany's alliance with Japan demanded that Hitler declare war on the United States as well. At that point in the conflict, Hitler shifted his central strategy to focus on breaking the alliance of his main opponents, namely Britain, the United States, and the Soviet Union, by forcing one of them to make peace with him. Concentration camps. Beginning in 1933, the SS had operated a network of concentration camps, including a notorious camp at Dachau, near Munich, to hold Jews and other targets of the Nazi regime. After war broke out, the Nazis shifted from expelling Jews from German-controlled territories to exterminating them. Einsatzgruppen, or mobile death squads, executed entire Jewish communities during the Soviet invasion, while the existing concentration camp network expanded to include death camps like Auschwitz-Birkenau in occupied Poland. Though the Nazis also imprisoned and killed Catholics, homosexuals, political dissidents, Roma, or Gypsies, and the disabled. Above all, they targeted Jews, some 6 million of whom were killed in German-occupied Europe by war's end. End of World War II. With defeats at El Alamein and Stalingrad, as well as the landing of US troops in North Africa by the end of 1942, the tide of the war turned against Germany. As the conflict continued, Hitler became increasingly unwell, isolated and dependent on medications administered by his personal physician. Several attempts were made on his life, including one that came close to succeeding in July 1944, when Colonel Klaus von Stauffenberg planted a bomb that exploded during a conference at Hitler's headquarters in East Prussia. Within a few months of the successful Allied invasion of Normandy in June 1944, the Allies had begun liberating cities across Europe. That December, Hitler attempted to direct another offensive through the Ardennes, trying to split British and American forces. But after January 1945, he holed up in a bunker beneath the Chancellery in Berlin. With Soviet forces closing in, Hitler made plans for a last-ditch resistance before finally abandoning that plan. How did Adolf Hitler die? At midnight on the night of the 28th to the 29th of April, Hitler married Eva Braun in the Berlin bunker. After dictating his political testament, Hitler shot himself in his suite on the 30th of April. Braun took poison. Their bodies were burned according to Hitler's instructions. With Soviet troops occupying Berlin, Germany surrendered unconditionally on all fronts on the 7th of May, 1945, bringing the war in Europe to a close. In the end, Hitler's planned Thousand-Year Reich lasted just over 12 years, but wreaked unfathomable destruction and devastation during that time, forever transforming the history of Germany, Europe, and the world.